The Cat's Whiskers podcast is proudly sponsored by the Bunkers Hill Hockley. Don't miss Panthers game day offers, including Coors Light at £2.50 a pint.
Hopefully you'll know this as take one, but if you don't, it's take two, but we are the Cat's Whiskers podcast live. Hello, it is Monday the 29th of January, as I've already said what feels like 3 times now. But yes, this is the Cat's Whiskers podcast, and we are looking back on this weekend's games and various other bits and bobs. Now, hopefully, this time around, I have with me Paul Balm.
Hello.
Antoine Marie-Jeanne.
Evening.
And Andy Haywood.
Hello.
Hurrah! Everybody's here. If you can hear us, then if somebody could just sort of speak up and confirm, because I'm getting a little bit paranoid now, that would be lovely. But if you do want to interact with us generally, and assuming that you can hear us, you can do so via Twitter. That'll be the best way to catch us, at Cat's Whiskers TV. So, yes, tonight, we're going to talk about the games from this weekend, Elite League news and results, and one Luke Pither. Now, didn't he have a good couple of games? But we'll come on to that in a moment. First of all, Saturday the Panthers took on the Belfast Giants in a game that I must admit I was a little bit nervous about, but needn't have been, because the Panthers came away 4-2 winners. Goals from debutant Luke Pither, Clark on the power play, then Pither not to be outdone on the power play, and Mosey wrapped it all up with an empty netter. Opposition goals from Connolly and Benedict. We were all there, chaps, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. So, Antoine, I will come to you first. Do you think the scoreline reflected the game?
If you look at the shots on goal, no. However, as myself and my friends were talking about it, the shots were heavily weighted because we were getting maybe one shot off at a time, and then Belfast were getting perhaps 3 or 4, which Galbraith was stoning. So I don't know. I thought we were the better team. If I'm, I've not got my black and gold tinted specs on, I promise you. I just generally thought we had a little bit more than them. But then saying that, I thought, second half of the first period and then maybe half of the second period, Belfast were the better team as well. So, yeah, it was a very tight game, and it was one that I was very, very pleased to come out with both points and not giving them any either.
I mean, just to sort of touch on that, and I'll come to you, Andy, about this. The way I sort of felt the first half of the first period, we came out of the blocks, pretty hard and looked good for our 2 goals. But then we sort of seemed to let Belfast back in it a little bit, and then from the second period onwards, the game sort of seemed to even out a bit. Would you agree with that, or did you see it a different way?
No, I think I'd agree with that up until perhaps the third period. Maybe I think we were good for the win, and I think that. Realistically, particularly in that third period, perhaps, there was literally only one Belfast player keeping that scoreline respectable, and that was Jackson Whistle, who was sublime on Saturday. He made what could be classed as 4 or 5 genuinely fantastic saves. Some of them you could make a case for a highlight reel anyway, but genuinely, at least 1 or 2 of them were potential saves of the season candidates, and they happened in the same game. So, he was fantastic, and I think I agree with you regarding the first 2 periods. I think that the first 10 minutes it was pretty much, we looked comfortable, we looked dominant, and we were extremely good for our 2-goal lead, and then Belfast got back into it, and they were by far the better team for that sort of final 10-minute chunk, and they hemmed us into into the zone for a lot of zone time at a couple of points in that period. The second period I thought was pretty even, and it was very much cat and mouse at times. It was end to end in places, and it was very much very even. But like I say, that third period, I thought we were the better team, and I think ultimately with the shots on goal, when Ants mentioned about the fact that he thought we were the better team, the shots on goal might depict otherwise, but I think the quality of shots on goal was definitely weighted in our favour. As I mentioned, Jackson Whistle played a blinder and made 4 or 5 top quality saves, and realistically, apart from a bit of a scramble towards the end, I think a lot of the stuff Galbraith saw was relatively routine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Belfast weren't very good in the attacking zone. They created chances and they had plenty of shots, but I think defensively, particularly in that third period, we managed to keep them out to sort of the face-off dots and sort of from the point rather than letting them get access to the slot relatively easily.
So Luke Pither makes the best start possible by scoring and then adding one on the power play later, as I mentioned at the top of this section. Paul, he's not bad, is he?
He didn't have a bad start. Definitely looked like he'd settled. He'd settled in well and seemed to be striking up. A fairly sort of good relationship with Delago. But time will tell. Obviously, there will already be plenty of people who say that he'll get it coached out of him, blah blah blah, and that. But we'll see. But just going back to the point, you asked the other guys about. One of the things that struck me was that even when it was 2-2, I wasn't anywhere near as worried about Belfast as I was about Cardiff when we were 4-0 up. Strange as that, that may sound. They never pressed us the way Cardiff did. They never, they were never able to just hem us in that same way. So, but obviously that's down to Pither. Said Paul, bringing it back round nicely in a circle.
And a lovely circle it is too. Luke Pither coming into the squad, nice refreshing change on the forward lines. Unfortunately, the Panthers have confirmed that one is departing as Matthew Brisebois is going home for family reasons. Bit of a disappointment, I would say, Ant.
A little bit, yeah. I think a lot of people have commented that you didn't really notice him, but as the saying goes, the best defenders tend to be the ones that you don't notice. It means they're not flashy, they just do the job. And for me, Brisebois, yes, he missed a chunk at the start of the season with his injury and he was playing catch-up from them, but I thought he was decent. I just hope we replace him quickly.
Andy, what would we like to see if one is coming in the shape of a replacement for Brisebois?
Just a relatively solid defenseman. I thought he was pretty solid in his own end. He was a very good skater, and I think he paired up quite well with Dan Spang when he played with Spang for a while. I just think we need a solid skater and a slightly more defensive minded, I would imagine, like Brisebois was. That being said, I think he sort of came into his own a little bit in our slump, and he was one of the few players I thought that looked a threat when we were going forward. I think he scored a couple of goals in that barren spell of wins, and I think at times he sort of thought, you know what, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to have to try and do it myself. So I quite liked him. I thought he was a decent player. I thought he was a decent defenseman that we had. And it's a shame to see him go, but I think if we're going to replace, I think we try and replace like for like, or maybe coming towards this time of the season, if with Pither arriving, we're looking at getting more attack from our forwards, then potentially you can make a case for a big no nonsense D-man. But time will tell, I suppose.
So just as to continue on with the departure of Breeze. Well, he didn't play on Saturday, but I believe he was still in the building. But it did mean that Lindhagen was shifted back to defence, and the nature of the game meant that there was no ice time for Tetlow, which is a little bit disappointing. Just want to get your thoughts on Lindhagen as a defenceman. First of all, is he the right choice to slot into that defensive? What's the word I'm looking for? That defensive slot, I suppose. And secondly, how do we think he did? I suppose I'll let that one sort of go out into the wilderness, and one of you can pick it up.
Well, I think at the moment he's the perfect candidate because he's had experience there before, and he is our sort of versatility player. And to be fair, he does a job. He did a job last season. He's done a job earlier on already this season when he's slotted back there. He will do a job there. Whether he should be there permanently or not is another issue. But I certainly don't think he's going to be a detriment to the squad if he does play on defence.
Okay. Anybody got any other thoughts on that at all? No.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean,
Go on.
Pretty much to agree. Sorry, I was dealing with some of the problems you caused earlier.
Yeah, my fault. Totally my fault.
I mean, I think Andy's right. You know, Lindhagen. I mean, who's it going to be? Essentially Lindhagen or Mosey. And you know, you at the moment you're really not going to want to move Mosey back there. You know, if you can help it. The other option, of course, is Tetlow. And you know. Okay, you don't want to drop him straight in, you know, say you're playing all game necessarily, but, you know, give him a few extra shifts. He certainly didn't disappoint or embarrass himself, you know, sort of over Christmas when he came in, or, you know, into the new year.
Okay, so final point on this particular game. One thing that I did hear, did see rattling around social media, and actually I did hear a few complaints about it, and we did sort of discuss it in the pub, those of us that were there afterwards in Bunkers Hill. Officiating. Discuss. Who wants to come in that first?
I think they had a shocker. Frankly, some of the calls were frankly mystifying. I mean, that coming together, I think it was the second period, where Delago got towards the end of the second period, where Delago got the 2 minute and nobody else did. I mean, quite high. If you're going to raise your stick up into somebody's face, then surely that's a penalty. But just as an aside, and I'll let the other guys talk about the officiating as well. I mean, I think my favourite moment of that particular altercation was Rutherford trying to get away from the grip Sauve had got on the front of his shirt and failing miserably. Yeah,
there was a certain element of scrappy-do to it, wasn't there? Andy, what's your thoughts on this particular subject matter?
Yeah, I agree with Paul, and I think that incident alone is a case in point, regardless of whether you know they completely missed the stick to what seemed to be the face. I don't think it was intentional in the slightest to put that out there. I think the bloke goes to throw a bit of a cross check as Delago turns into him, and it sort of rides up and it catches him up high. Now, whether it's in the face or in the chest, but there's definitely contact, which then in turn makes Delago rough him up, which is where the penalty came from, which I have no issue with. But even aside, you've got to think that just watching that whole altercation, you've got to think that Sauve realistically should have had a penalty in that situation. You know, and there was just so many things throughout the game that was just completely missed, and you could see players getting more and more frustrated with the officials, and that's not a good thing. And I appreciate that they're going to miss things, and I appreciate that each team is going to have a level of bias that, oh, you've missed this one on me, or you've missed this one on my team, or there's going to be a lot of that. But there were so many players in that game that seemed either angry at decisions or mystified, and that's not just from a Panthers perspective. I mean, Connolly and Silvestre, they were both at times, either furious or perplexed with decisions. Sauvé and Delego, there was plenty of players from both teams that seemed to not really understand either A, why something was called, or B, why something wasn't called. And it's games like that where there's the potential that it can get nasty, and you think, not necessarily with players trying to hurt each other, but just, it wouldn't have been surprised if you see people starting to take 10-minute misconducts, because genuinely some of the decisions were just completely baffling to me. And for the players in question, it must have been exactly the same.
I think one of the things that got me then, and it sort of is one of the criticisms I've got of the 4 official system, is that a lot of the time it was almost like it was being refereeing by committee. A whistle, they'd blow a whistle for something, and then they'd stand and have a conversation to try and work out why they'd just blown the whistle or whatever it was. And go on.
I was going to say, there was that point in, I think it was the third period, where we were on the power play, and one of the referees put their hand up to give Belfast a second penalty, to give us a 5-on-3. And while his arm was in the air, we lost possession of the puck, and it was cleared down the ice. And yet play was still allowed to carry on to the point where the player had come out of the box before the next breaking play, when the whistle then gave the Giants player the other penalty. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't make a difference because we've come out and won. But, if Belfast would have won that game, you could have made a very strong case that we were done out of the 5-on-3 by just complete inept officiating. It wasn't even tight. The arm went up and the penalty was called. Gal Brayford was off the ice before Belfast had cleared it, and yet the play wasn't whistled dead. And that was at one point where David Clark was furious. I mean, he was absolutely livid, and realistically, you don't see that very often. It's not like David Clark to get so wound up and so frustrated. But he was furious, and it's just little things like that tick players off and really frustrate crowds. And I think Corey had a word with one of the refs after that break as well, and and like I say, Belfast themselves, they were visibly angry at times. And like I say, visibly just completely dumbfounded by some of the decisions.
Ant, any thoughts to add in on the officiating from Saturday?
No, it was one of those that sort of leans into the fans' thoughts that the officials don't really know what they're doing. It was almost at one point like they were doing a Chuckle Brothers to me to you, because it seemed like we'd been on the wrong side of a lot of soft calls and dubious calls, and then that last period, all of a sudden, we're getting power play after power play, and eventually we capitalised. So it's like almost back to the old days when I think it was Andy Carson who was typically, I'm going to give all the penalties to you in this period, and in the second period I'm going to give them all to them. In the third period, you're not getting anything. Except this carried on throughout the entire game. It wasn't the best, but luckily we got away with it. Some of the unjust calls, Belfast will no doubt feel aggravated, but I think everybody else has got it perfectly. Especially Andy when he mentioned we're lucky that there was no 10-minute misconduct, because the players were clearly not happy.
I mean, let's not say that people weren't making. Some of the calls weren't justified. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, when we went on the 5-on-3, I mean, Martinelli, well, I think he went in the end for slashing, but he could have gone for holding, cross-checking.
The stick must have gone 10 foot in the air that he slashed. Yeah. blew out of the bloke's hands.
He was just all over the place, and he just dumbfounded. Why isn't he calling anything? But hey, we won.
Okay, so we'll leave Saturday there, and we'll move on to Sunday. Although, as far as I'm aware, guys, I think I'm the only one of the four of us that saw yesterday's game. Would that be correct?
It would.
Okay.
Yeah, I was following you on Panthers Hockey Live, so.
yeah. Well, yes.
And obviously our Scottish chum.
Yes, I was going to say. Yeah, I wasn't really in the mood for much in the way of descriptive Panthers Hockey Live, I'm afraid. So it
wasn't a lot to describe, was there?
No, not really. Anyway, Paul, I'll hand over to you for this section, and you can you can ask me about all the nothing that happened.
Yeah. If I'm reading off the agenda, it says that on Saturday, Flyers played Panthers and won 3-2.
Ignore the agenda.
Yeah.
I was trying to do that in between work.
We know it was Sunday. Obviously, the Panthers' goals came from Sauvé and Alago, and for Fife, Bloodoff got 2 with Young getting the winning game. So, by the sound of it, and I must admit, I've seen absolutely none of it. I looked and saw the highlights were 17 minutes long and thought, I really haven't got that much time today. So Tina, describe in great and vivid detail the excitement that was the first 2 periods.
Oh, I could just give you a yawn emoji right now.
Let's move
yeah. Well, to be fair, that's as much as need. I mean, Sauvé scored. That was kind of the first 2 periods. I mean, there was a couple of flurries here and there around each net, a few surges from teams. I think there might have been a breakaway somewhere along the way, but there was an awful lot of backwards and forwards, not a lot of end product, and a few saves here and there, and nothing to get excited about until Sauvé scored. And it was really odd because in the third period, they came out like it was the first. They came out like it was like, right, we've just got here. The game started. We're full of energy. Go. So it was just really odd. I mean, the really odd thing for me is that Fife didn't sort of capitalise on our apathy is not quite the right word, but it wasn't. There wasn't a sort of a concentrated effort from us to shake off the, in inverted commas, bus legs. But Fife really, they could have attacked us a lot harder than they did, and probably got something out of it a lot sooner than they did. I mean, they won in the end, so obviously they're probably not bothered about the ins and outs of why they didn't come out in the first period all guns blazing and trying to give themselves a bit of a goal cushion going forward into the rest of the periods. But yeah, so yeah. Whole lot of nothing. Sauvé scores, and then in the third period, it's sort of real. There's a real intensity about the game. So yeah, it was a lovely third period to watch, though. To be fair, aside from us losing, but yeah, decent little third period.
I mean, Ant, did you expect us to get any points from the game?
No. But then yes, which is probably
before the game. Did you expect anything? Yeah.
Well, Tina will tell you, we do a little predictions league, and I actually had a Panthers win. So by that point, then yes, I did. And that's how my mindset's changed over the performances we've had against Belfast and Cardiff. I thought it'd be tough. I thought it might go as far as overtime and or penalties. At minimum, I was hoping we'd get a point. So I was very disappointed to lose. Especially so late. I was at the last 5 minutes that the goal went in. So it's a disappointing result. Let's just hope it's not the start of another slump.
Well, we'll get to our next games later. Andy, Galbraith started both the games this weekend. Were you surprised by that?
I was a little bit, yeah. That being said, it's kind of what a lot of people have cried out for, is that we were going to sort of stick with the hot goalie, as it were. So it's one of the things I was surprised, and I presumed that Garnett would be starting. So when I read that it was Galbraith, it did sort of take me back a little bit. But it's quite good in a sense that like I say, you ride the hot goalie. He'd had a decent enough game the night before. Why not start him? I'm sure he's used to travelling and playing multiple games back to back in his career, so I don't think there's that much of an issue there. But no, like I say, I was surprised just because of the way it's been rotated in previous weeks. But that being said, maybe they felt that the rotation hasn't quite been working, so we'll stick with the same goalie for the second game of the weekend. And obviously, it's not worked out in this case. So will we see Garnett on Saturday? We'll wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you all now, and in the spirit of the fact that there isn't an Ask TCW on Wednesday, I forget why. Who do you see now as our number one netminder? Well, Tina, you've been asking the questions. I'll ask you one.
Yes, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, Galbraith starting 2 consecutive games when we have, a fully fit Mike Garnett who was first in. It does sort of point towards, Galbraith. But I mean, I know what, I know what Ant was saying. It's sorry, what Andy was saying. It's consistency, isn't it? Do the team have to mentally readjust to playing with a different goalie? They don't seem to have, wildly dissimilar styles, but there's obviously little subtleties here and there that maybe you've got to get used to, and the consistency of the same goaltender. Will it reap the benefits? Perhaps. Don't know. It's a very. I think. I'll be with Galbraith starting both games this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised to see Garnett go in on Wednesday. I don't think that's really exactly an answer to the question. But I think there is an element of sticking with the hot goalie. So, and I think which goalie is doing well at any given time, perhaps that will dictate who is our number one goalie.
Okay, well, sort of developing on that, that theme, and does it matter? Does it matter that we're almost in a stage where we haven't got a definite number one and a number two?
No, I don't think it does. We are blessed, as we've said many a time, with our goaltending trifecta, if that's the right word to use. And let's face it, triumvirate, tripod, whatever, Garnett and Galbraith would walk into each other elite league team, bar none. And maybe Andy would dispute that with Mustakovs, but they'd snap your hands off to have either of them, and we've got both. So it's great, and I have full confidence in both of them.
Okay, well, Andy, the question's there. Would you dispute that?
Well, yeah, I don't think every team would swap them. To be honest, I think the league itself in general is blessed with having some very good netminders, and I think it always has done. You think back to seasons gone by where you look at teams that have finished 6th, 5th, 7th, and they've had fantastic netminders playing for them, and I think realistically, yes, Galbraith and Garnett are exceptionally good, and I'm certainly happy that they're playing for us. But that being said, I think Guildford would still rather have Brian Stewart. I think Sheffield still rather have Mustakovs. Cardiff would still rather have Bounds. To be fair, on current form, I don't think Belfast would be willing to give up Whistle. If you're looking at it on paper, then yes, I think Galbraith and Garnett are both better than Whistle. But like I say, on current form at the moment and the way he's played since Murphy's been injured, I don't think they'd want to see him replaced by anyone at the moment.
So it's up on him last night.
Well, true. But it's like I say, they're very, very good. But I disagree with the fact that they would walk into any team in this league, because if they were going to walk into any team in this league, would be top of the league by a country mile, and we're not.
Well, on that happy and harmonious note, we'll move on. Ant, Pither got 2 assists last night. Was he worth the wait, do you reckon?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a good start, isn't it? Too early to ask that. Yes, I would have liked him in sooner. But it's certainly a very, very good start, and long may it continue, hopefully.
Exactly. Well, that brings us on to Player of the Week for this week. And, well, I think who's going to get it's fairly obvious. So we'll keep you all in suspense, obviously. In third place, I've got to admit this did surprise me a little, was Jan Sauvé. Stunned silence.
I thought he had a good weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I especially like Matt Davies' tweet about Jimmy Cranky as well. I must admit that.
well, yeah.
I imagine Matt
probably got the odd extra point for that. He was just like, when it was the opposite of when you see an owner trying to struggle to contain the dog on the lead, wasn't it? It was like the dog desperately trying to get away and failing. But in second place, yeah, he's in the top 3 again. It's Patrick Galbraith. And I've just realised I'm slowly turning into a 1980s Radio 1 DJ. And, well, anybody want to guess at who was number 1?
Not off.
Thank you, I deserve that, yeah. Yes, it was Luke Pither. What a surprise.
I mean, just to put a little bit of context on Pither's weekend, he's 1 goal away from joining Josh Schaller on 3 goals. And he's been here for 2 games.
Yeah, but Schaller started quite quickly as well, didn't he? Not like quickly.
Don't say things like that. Don't boost our bubble already.
Hey, we've got to keep the KE Giants happy.
They're never happy. Maybe some of them.
They are. They've got something to moan about now. Okay, moving on to a few of your comments from the weekend. Surprisingly enough, Pith, he's going to be. I'm going to have so much problem with his name. That new bloke features quite a lot. So you got what a finding Luke Pither, or like Pither, somebody else has got problems as well. Well spotted Corey. Pither impressive. Delego has upped his game whilst with him, which I think is a point to make as well. Good performance in general. Hope to see a D-man replacement and another forward. Some people are never happy. We'll skip over the one about people queuing for playoff tickets. It's borderline offensive. Beating Belfast is just a piece of piss. Somebody obviously knew what we were going to call this. Gagnon outstanding both at back and his attacking player, but something we've not touched on yet. And his forward movement was superb, not a goon by any means. Sooner have him than McGrattan any day. What do we think of that?
Well, he certainly wasn't good on the shift for Belfast's second goal, because that was a comedy of errors. And don't get me wrong, he certainly wasn't solely to blame, but he was literally just chasing shadows all over our defensive zone. Just couldn't get anywhere close to anyone or anything, in my opinion. So, I've been very impressed with him, but I don't think he's without fault, shall we say. As no player is. With regards to him or McGrattan, it's one of them things. It's so difficult to compare players that don't play in the same position that do the same role. So I think what McGrattan gave us was fantastic, and I think he did his job exceptionally well, and I think he exceeded expectation as a player, and I think Gagnon has done the same. That being said, I think with him being a defenseman, it sort of I always feel with defensemen that are enforcers or fighters that you have to be slightly more careful with the way you play the game, because particularly in recent years we have a smaller selection of import defensemen, and at times having them off the ice can be more detrimental than a fourth line forward. So it's one of them things. I've been well impressed with both of them in the 2 years they were here, and I think that it's a bit difficult to compare Gagnon and McGrattan, other than in their role as fighters, and realistically, as much as Gagnon's game, and he's good fun and good entertainment. If you want a fighter on your team in pretty much any league, you take Brian McGrattan because he's an absolute monster.
I mean, I guess it depends. Like you're saying, the role you want people to play. Talking about defensemen, and another of the comments, we need to sign another D-man, a big grizzly one. So, do you like a big grizzly D-man?
Oh, I'd love a big grizzly bear. Yeah, I mean that's why I've said this a couple of times now. I thought if we're going to add another player, I'd like a little bit more strength at the back. So yeah, someone in a sort of Beckett mould would be perfect for me.
Yeah, that's the name that was going through my mind as well. And finally, from the comments, Tina, something that I know is very close to your heart.
Oh dear.
Now that you mentioned the price of beer, it's outrageous. A 40p increase on the majority of drink products in one go is not justifiable in any way. Do you remember that happening on Saturday night?
I didn't buy a drink on Saturday at the arena, so I don't know. I don't know. I haven't got a clue.
For what it's worth, the Panthers beer was still £4 with £1 back when you take your glass back. So
can anybody explain to me what Panther beer actually is? Is it a bitter? Is it a lager? Is it somewhere in between the two? Is it
It's like one of them craft beers. It's a Belhaven, I understand.
Belhaven's a craft beer?
Yeah.
You're nearly right with craft. Yeah,
I like it. I think it's all right.
I can never quite work out what it tastes of, though. You say whether it's bitter, whether it's like cider, or whatever. I think they just mix it all together and just that'll do. Anyway, Tina, do you want to move on?
Yeah. Why not? Let's. It's Monday. We don't already need to be talking about beer. Some of us have got another 4 days to go before the weekend. Well, no, I don't drink on a school night, Paul. I don't drink on a school night. It doesn't happen. Right. Anyway, just wanted to touch on a little bit of statage, if you will. I put together a table which I am trying to coordinate and tweet out so that it can be looked at. What sort of timestamp are we at? Right, okay, around the 38-minute mark. Yeah, basically, this just kind of touches on our record over the last couple of months. Obviously, we all know that December was not good, but how it's pretty interesting reading. I just sort of randomly put it together. So that has gone. I have tweeted that out. So anybody who is listening live, you can go to our Twitter page at Cats Whiskers TV and just have a look at this while I'm just sort of picking some bits and bobs out. Now, this month, as in January, we've obviously completed our league games in January, so I could sort of collate this all together. This is probably the first month that we have been particularly sensitive to scoring first. Most other months, it's not been. It's kind of been a bit of a lottery. It's not really seemed to affect anything. But we have, when scoring first in January, we have won 4 games in regulation, we've taken 1 other win and 2 regulation losses. Whereas, for example, in December, when we scored first, it was 1 regulation win, 2 regulation losses, and 1 overtime loss. And that's a sort of a familiar pattern, to be honest. And one other thing we can just sort of touch on that we've already discussed, the sort of Garnett versus Galbraith discussion. Mike Garnett had a pretty awful December. He's probably going to want to forget it, because he came out with 3 regulation losses, 1 overtime loss, and a shootout loss. He did, come out of it with a couple of points. But Galbraith's December was markedly better because he came out with 3 regulation wins and only 2 regulation losses. Fast forward to this month. That was December. Fast forward to this month. Garnett has 1 regulation win, 1 other win, and 1 regulation loss. Galbraith has 3 regulation wins and 3 regulation losses. So it seems to be a bit more evenly spread for both goaltenders. But yeah, as I said, the most interesting thing I found when I was putting this together is that we're particularly sensitive to scoring first. Normally, if we are leading or even after 2 periods, that's the part where you can more often than not bet on our Panthers win. And when we're trailing after 2, we don't often come out with anything. So that seems to be the key. The key sort of statistic, if you will, in terms of actual gameplay. So as I say, that has been tweeted out. So if you want to have a look at that, send me any corrections if you like, because I've normally got something wrong somewhere. I'm sure there's some budding statos now who are furiously going back over our league records and hoping that I've got something wrong so it can be pointed out. So thank you. Constructive criticism is always welcome. We'll move on to other Elite League results and news. It would be remiss of me not to pause for a moment and just maybe fast forward a little to Sunday. You could be forgiven for thinking that Belfast might be looking for a little bit of retribution in the direction of the Sheffield Steelers. Unfortunately, the Steelers were also looking for their own retribution after losing away in Milton Keynes and thumping the Giants a whopping 8-0. I don't think anybody would have seen that coming. Comments at all, chaps?
I mean, I think one of the things to pick up out of it is that Sheffield got 3 short-handed goals in those 8, and having watched the goals, it was a night to forget for Belfast. But one of the things from the weekend I did see that did make me laugh was that after Sheffield had lost to Milton Keynes, they were bragging about how many more shots than Milton Keynes they'd had. And, they'd had 49 shots and scored 2. And Milton Keynes, they'd only had 17 shots, but scored 5. Now, surely that just makes things worse. Yeah,
it is a little bit tenuous, isn't it? Trying to pull a positive from thin air. Just accept that you lost. While we're sort of talking about still talking about Milton Keynes, Milton Keynes have brought in Panthers old mucker Henry Passel to cover for the injured Mika Weekman, and as Paul has just mentioned, he faced an absolute barrage of shots and brought Milton Keynes a win. So well done, Henry. I don't believe we have any games left. Do we have any games left to play Milton Keynes? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think we've got one more league game.
Yeah, so we wish you the very best of luck, Henry, until that point. A weekend of returns, it would seem. Brian Stewart played his first game for the Guildford Flames since September, and Chris Lawrence returned from a lengthy injury for Dundee. Dundee as well picked up a a surprising win, I suppose, really. I mean, I didn't see it coming, against the Fife Flyers in overtime. So, good result for them, and it's seen them, the recent run of form they've had has seen them sort of creep up the table. They've been rooted at 11th for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they've sort of made a bit of a push further up the table. So Braehead are kind of looking over their shoulder a little bit at the moment. It's a team a little bit closer to home, as it were. They're conference rivals. So yeah, the race for 8th, I think, is kind of on. I think we'd quite like at the moment for them to just concentrate on 8th and leave 7th alone, because we seem to be getting quite familiar with that sort of part of the table. Couple of other results. The Devils have stretched away with two wins over the Coventry Blaze, one home, one away. Both one-goal games, so I think Coventry are probably feeling pretty frustrated right now. The Braehead clan will be quite pleased about that, because that's another one of their 8th place rivals that are losing points at the expense of somebody who, to be fair, they're probably not catching. But neither are we. The Edinburgh Capitals still having a ridiculously miserable season, haven't yet achieved double figures in points in the table. A couple of other bits and bobs. The Flames have released Rasmus Edstrom after bringing in Mike Krieg, and let's have a look. Flames, the Guildford Flames came back from 2-0 down to beat Milton Keynes Lightning at home. So the Lightning's euphoria at picking up a win at home. Unfortunately, their mediocre away form continues. Right. Our mate, John O'Bullard, sent me a message earlier today, and he's asked me to give a plug to the Nottingham Lions, who are playing Billingham Stars on Saturday at 5:30. So anybody who's not going to Sheffield, and anybody who is not intending to watch that game via the webcast, the Lions will be playing in the main arena at 5:30 p.m. at the NIC. So if you fancy a bit of live hockey, and as I say, you're not going to watch the Panthers, it's there, ready and waiting for you. You can get yourself a nice seat closer to the ice if you're not used to that sort of thing, and cheer on the other Nottingham senior team. Okay, so we will have a look-see at the games upcoming. As I've mentioned, the Nottingham Panthers are away to the Sheffield Steelers. It's a 7 p.m. face-off. As I looked earlier, and I'm happy to be corrected, Sheffield Steelers TV had not confirmed whether there was going to be a webcast. So that's a watch this space. I don't know if anybody can correct me or confirm or deny or whatever. We don't have the greatest of records against the Steelers in their arena, do we, Andy?
No, we don't. I don't think we've had a great record against them so far this season, but admittedly the 2 games over Christmas play a big part in that. We've still got a few games against them left. I fancy it to be quite a close game. I'm not convinced of which way it will go. I wouldn't be surprised if we won it. But equally, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't. is the best way. I kind of feel like we're due one, which is why I kind of feel like I wouldn't be surprised if we did win. We've got a team that has started to play a bit better recently. Obviously, we've got a new player in who's performed very well in his first weekend. I think we are due one against Sheffield, and probably in Sheffield as well. But that being said, they are still a very good team, and they are a team that, like you say, currently at the moment have our number. From our point of view, from a Panthers point of view, it would be nice if their injury crisis sort of takes its toll a little bit, and we're able to get the win.
And their game yesterday was obviously something of a demolition against the Belfast Giants. Should that result give us any concerns?
No more than a game against them normally should. It's the one that they hype up the most. It's the one that we hype up the most. It's the ones that regardless of how meh, I suppose, some of us now feel about the rivalry, it is the big game that everybody seems to want to go and see. So, regardless of what happened last weekend, when it comes to these games, you throw it out the window. As you know, it's a typical derby game. So, like Andy said, we owe him one. Are we due one? Yes, hopefully. Fingers crossed. You know, we defend well. We get a couple of breaks, and you know, to be fair, I will not care what the score is as long as we win. We could be 1-0 with the most ridiculous own goal from Ben O'Connor, as far as I'm concerned, as long as we get the win.
Paul, we've sort of briefly touched on it. We would like to see a new defenceman in for Matthew Brisebois. Surely we're not going to have anybody in by then.
I wouldn't have thought so, to be honest. No, I mean, these things obviously take time, and then there's the permits, and you know, we've still got a bit of time. We don't have to panic by, but I'm talking really slowly because I'm just trying to find something I was sent earlier. But the Cincinnati Cyclones have just released a player who's rumoured to be coming to Europe.
Is he a D-man?
Yes.
Hurrah!
Trecapelli. So
that's a brilliant name.
First, people.
That's amazing. Can we have him just for the name? That's brilliant.
No, because it took me ages to work out how to say it. But if he does come, you heard it here first. Or if he signs to somebody else, then you heard it here first.
Let the rumour mill go. Let the rumour mill fly. Yeah. Just you know, set it off, watch it go. Just one quick question, guys. Who starts in net on Saturday?
Give gospel a game. League's gone.
League's not gone. Galbraith.
Yeah, I think I would probably agree. Yeah, I can see Garnett getting Wednesday night, but for me, it's got to be Galbraith.
Andy?
I think it depends on Wednesday night, because I think Garnett probably plays Wednesday. If he plays a blinder, I think there's no reason to change it up. So I think a lot will depend on the next game.
Okay, so we'll leave Saturday there. Sunday, we are going to be having a home game, and we're being visited by the Dundee Stars for a 4 p.m. face-off at the NIC. We haven't seen Dundee yet this season, and annoyingly, they've just started having an upturn of form. So just when they're going to play us, that's a nice little happy coincidence, isn't it? We obviously cannot afford to take this game lightly. Ant, what do you think about this one?
No, we can't. I want Lawrence smashed first shift, and that's not any relation to any sort of drinking capabilities. We cannot take them lightly. We can't take anybody lightly. There's 11 other good teams in this league. Well, maybe 10 and a half, depending on the amount of players Edinburgh have got left. But I expect Dundee to come out. I expect them to play the typical Omar Pacha. They'll probably defend well, lead one man high, and try to get catches on the break. I just hope we don't fall for it.
Paul, are we going to be welcoming Chris Lawrence back to the NIC?
I'm sure there'll be some people who will. And let's just leave it at that. Will I be one of them? No, not really. I mean, my thoughts on Lawrence have been well documented on this podcast in the past. He's great when he's playing for a contract, and not quite as good, shall we say, when he isn't. But let's face it, he's coming back. He's playing us. Has he got is there unfinished business? Has he got half a pint left in the legend that he didn't finish last time he was in there? It's I don't know. I'll certainly not be cheering him when he comes on. As far as I'm concerned, he's just another member of the opposition.
Before the game, during the game, he means nothing to me. I mean, he was a character. I must admit, I did like Dundee's return video that they did for him. And I'll probably clap him off the ice, but that'll be as far as it'll go.
Joe Grimaldi was a character.
Joe Grimaldi was a character,
yeah,
not allowed to say.
I'm going to say, I haven't got the beep machine queued up and ready, so keep it clean, guys, keep it clean.
I stopped myself.
Andy, I mean, as I say, we've not seen Dundee yet, so you can be forgiven for passing on this question, but who do you think there are any particular players that Dundee have that pose a threat to us that we should be watching?
I'll pass on that question.
All right, we'll go back to the first one.
I have no idea, and I'm sure they've got a couple of players that are sort of their go-to guys. I imagine Chris Lawrence will probably be one of them. On his day, he can be a real asset and can score goals. So I think we've got to look after him. But I think, I'd certainly like to think that we know enough about his game that we should be able to sort of keep him at bay.
Okay.
But other than that, I'm just having a quick look. Levesque has got 39 points from 37 games, and Mimar is also going at just under a point a game. So I would imagine those two are probably their sort of go-to forwards, perhaps. But not seen them, so I genuinely could be talking nonsense. Just ever so quickly, I don't want to sort of rain on Paul's parade, but it would appear that Nick Trekapelli has signed in Slovakia.
Well, that just teaches me for listening to what one of my kids said to me.
I think that's a very rough translation from a Slovakian website.
Yeah.
Oh, for what it's worth.
You know what he's done? He's been having a post round on elite prospects, seen somebody go in and thought, oh, they'll be coming here. I'll be having those.
There's a couple of other players posting on the cage that have just both left Brampton, and since we seem to be signing ex-Brampton players, maybe one of them's added, aren't we?
Yeah, we are the Brampton Beast feeder team, apparently.
Yeah, just think, this time last week, signing players from Brampton was described as lazy recruiting by some. You know if they agree with that now?
Yes, indeed. You need to tell your son, Paul, that he knows nothing.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, trust me.
Right, chaps, unless unless there is anything else that you'd like to talk about before we wrap things up. There was the pause. Nope. No. Okay. Yes, then we will wrap up this edition of the podcast. Just a quick public service announcement. There, as has, if you've been paying attention, it's been mentioned already on the podcast. We will not be doing Ask TCW this Wednesday because of the home leg of the Challenge Cup semi-final, which is at the NIC, 7:30pm face-off. Good seats still available, I hear. One of them might be mine because I haven't bought my ticket. So look after my seat if you're in it. Yeah, look after my seat if you're in it, please. Try not to break it. So, yes, we'll not be doing Ask TCW this week, and we are going to, drumroll please, we're going to Pubcast on Sunday, so there won't be a review podcast on Monday night for you to listen live, but there will already be a Pubcast, well, there should already be a Pubcast ready and waiting for you to listen to in its absence. So we will, time to be confirmed, because I've got a ridiculously early start on next Monday morning. So we'll tweet it out as soon as we've agreed it all. Yes, and you can listen to us having fun in the Bunkers Hill, talking about everything that has happened over the weekend. Next week's Ask TCW is going to be a sort of a late decision as well, because the away leg of the Challenge Cup semi-final, annoyingly, is also on a Wednesday. So
what you're saying is it depends on this Wednesday.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if it's an absolute, if they've already absolutely mullered us, then we might just do it anyway, because none of us will want to watch the webcast. So yes, that's sort of the state of play at the moment. No Ask TCW this Wednesday. Pubcast live from the Bunkers Hill on Sunday after the game against the Dundee Stars, and Ask TCW next week is going to be a late decision on an actual day. Time will more than likely be 8:45, as is usual. We like to keep things consistent where we can. But yes, and then hopefully we'll be able to return to some semblance of normality following that. So, all that remains for me to say is thank you very much to Andy Haywood.
No worries at all, anytime.
Antoine Marie-Jeanne.
Potatoes, potatoes.
And Paul Balm.
I can't follow that, can I? Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
This edition of the Cat's Whiskers podcast was brought to you by the Bunkers Hill Hockley.